Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Today we finally get all of the high torques from the big three on the dyno by adding this Makita XWT08Z into the mix. That's not to say that there aren't other cordless high torques in contention for the crown on our rank list, and if a specific high torque comes to mind for you that we haven't done, we probably will be doing it. But these three high torques we're showing today represent the biggest half-inch drive impact wrenches from that teal, yellow, and red teams that seem to dominate most of the discussion on the job site and maybe your favorite message board. So we're going to test out these three tools and chart their torque as usual, see what they're able to put down on our dyno, give them a wrist-breaking score, then rank them on our leaderboard at the end of this episode. This particular high torque was provided to us by all-star viewer Jonda, who also lent us his Aircat 1250K for that episode. At an advertised 740 foot-pounds and 1180 foot-pounds nut-busting torque, the Makita fits right in with the Dewalt's DCF899 700-1200 figures, but maybe a bit removed from the 1000 and 1400 figures of the Milwaukee specs, if those are to be believed. But today we'll find out. If this Makita is able to pull it off, it wouldn't be the first time Makita has bested a Milwaukee on this channel. In episode 26, the new Makita mid-torque put quite a gap on the newest Gen 2 mid-torque from M18, although those are models that are less than a year old for both teams. The XWT08Z, which is still Makita's latest half-inch high torque, is 5 to 6 years long in the tooth at this point, so we'll have to see if that 18-volt LXT technology from Makita is able to put on just as good a performance as that mid-torque did against the similarly not young models from Dewalt and Milwaukee today. That Makita mid-torque was definitely not on a diet though, sitting next to the M18 Gen 2, and this high torque is no different. It's both the heaviest at 6.5 pounds dry and 8 pounds with a battery, and longest of the bunch at 9 inches compared to 8.8 inches of the Dewalt and 8.4 of the M18. So you'll definitely notice holding this thing, meaning it better bring the beans in that department. Even considering those larger specs we mentioned, this thing looks like a chunker. Next to the already chunky mid-torque, the body on this tool is sort of just tall, like especially in the rear. She's got some junk in the trunk for sure. Hopefully that mass helps to dampen the rattling around most cordless impacts like to do. In their episodes, the M18 got our highest wrist-breaking score of 7.5 yet, acting sort of like a cement mixer with a misfire. The Dewalt got a 6.0 from us. Same sort of vibration style, but noticeably less. We'll have to see how the Makita stacks up today. At the $259 this model goes for from most places, it already takes first place in one regard, and that's price. The 2767-20 and Dewalt DCF899 come out to $250 and $220 when sold bare when we tested them. And so while this Makita isn't miles from that, it has some ground to make up. Some other details we weren't so pleased as punch about include this hog ring, which, if you can call it that, appears to be some simple wire cut to length with some wire snips. Pretty much every other air and cordless impact we've tested uses a hog ring, like this Milwaukee shown here, which is an O-ring, then a straight cut steel collar. That rubber O-ring gives the retention some spring back. Also, the working light on Makita is one of the dimmest we've seen from any brand. But on the other hand, this tool was assembled in the USA, without all that sticker treatment that the Dewalt does pretty much everywhere they have a spare square inch. And Makita's got that shock-absorbing wobble base that we think is actually pretty neat and saves your batteries from an early vibrating death. Let's get into the testing though. On our first test of 3, we have working torque. This is 5 seconds in forward, median test of 3 shown on screen as usual. Here's the M18 2767 up against the Dewalt DCF899. And here's the Makita, which advertises the least forward torque of the bunch at 740 foot-pounds. Now there's no denying that the M18 is a beast in forward, but 740 versus 1,000 foot-pounds advertised, the Makita is supposed to be around 26% down here, which would put it at 423 foot-pounds, but instead it's only 10% down. Considering that performance, let's see how things work out in reverse with our 10-second max torque test. Here's that Dewalt high torque up against the M18. So both the Makita and Dewalt finished near each other in this test, but both also far down from the Milwaukee. But one thing you might not have picked up on from that video is just how incredibly difficult this tool is to hold on to and keep seated on that bolt while it's really needing to try its hardest for any amount of time. Here's one of our first attempts. It vibrated the wrench from the backside right off our dyno. And here's another. That's the Makita literally bucking our guy test off the bolt head. If the vibrating action of the Milwaukee and the Dewalt is sort of like a broken washing machine, and the flex is like a strong corded drill just turning your arm, pulling the trigger on the Makita on a tough bolt is like your auntie slapping you upside the head with her sandal. You quickly think back about what you must have done wrong to end up in this situation. The impact sort of hits you and pushes back on you while impacting. All of our runs were performed with a heavy dose of forward pressure to keep this thing on the bolt. The Makita High Torque gets a 9.0 on our subjective, admittedly, wrist breaking score. Not one-handed operation certified by TTC. Let's see if that sandal slapping power can convert into big points, however, on our third and final test, which is called best case scenario. Here's the Makita on the dyno with all three tools on screen. So a solid second place finish here for the Makita in this test, with about 10% or 70 foot-pounds off the first place cordless Milwaukee. As you can see from the new gap between these tools, between the Max and BCS test, the Dewalt did not like this 15-second test. And as you may have heard in the last video that we did on it, you could kind of hear that crack and pop like Rice Krispie treats going on in the Dewalt. Sort of like gears grinding together towards the end of the run. We'd like to probably get our hands on another one of these Dewalts down the road, probably a brand new one. But as far as this episode goes, the Dewalt finished last, albeit sometimes closer than others, in every test. So we don't expect it would improve its standing within these three top tool brands using equal batteries. That said, we think the Dewalt is a good buy when you consider the Makita's heavier, longer, more expensive, dimmer lighting, no real hog ring, and it beats you up like it's your first day in prison. Not to mention, it has a fraction of the battery options if you do want to slap on some extra beans. I know we're the torque test channel, but the cons list column for the Makita is growing by the minute. And speaking of batteries, on our next episode, we'll be showing how some of the most common Makita batteries for this LXT line affect power on both the high torque and our top-ranking Makita mid-torque, which we can 100% recommend. Maybe even as an alternative in that tool to owning a high torque if you can swing it considering the power it put out in its episode. Considering where that Makita mid-torque placed on our chart, and it being a 2021 tool, we're pretty excited about the new XGT 40 volt introduction by Makita into the high torque range. Unfortunately, it's only available as 3/4 inch so far, but we think considering the new mid-torque's performance, this may have the chops to beat Milwaukee's 3/4 inch, and maybe do away with some of the downsides from the LXT we've witnessed today. If a viewer loans us one of those, or we win the lottery, you'll be sure to see it here. For now, let's see how the Makita settles in our rank chart. Starting near the bottom for now while we tally up its points, we have the Makita here, and it's weight, dry, and loaded with battery. Its power runs get turned into points. That's 51, 60, and 69. Some pretty decent numbers there. This tool definitely does make power. Next is foot-pounds per inch. That's 689 divided by its 9 inches, which makes for 76.7 points. Next is a good one for Makita. That's their conservative 740 figure. It's compared to its BCS run of 689, and that's 93% or 93 points. We're tightening in these tests, even in reverse, so we compare to that working torque figure on the box. When it comes to price, that's 259 versus its top power run, which comes out to 39.9 points, which is sort of not great in this field. But that's still enough for 389.5 points. Enough for stealing 7th place from the Flex, but still down on the list from the Milwaukee High Torque, which remains our top-ranked cordless impact. Stick around as we test battery size versus power on the Makita High Torque and Mid Torque, with plenty more high torques from other brands coming down the road. Subscribe if that sounds like your cup of tea. Hit the like button since it seems like YouTube's algorithm monster is having an appetite for those lately. And thank you for watching.